Welcome back to another Coffee with Laura. I, of course, am Laura. I'm so happy you joined me today because this is a really important topic. Nobody really likes to suffer in their life, right? But yet we all have some component of it. But did you know that we have a lot more control than we actually give ourselves credit for? For those who don't know, I work to help people overcome the daily life challenges of stress and overwhelm by helping them reclaim authority over their own mind so they can really embody the experience of health that they desire. And how we suffer is really at the heart of that. In Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, there's a very key lesson that he talks about, and he phrases it as choose your suffering. And we all do this, but we don't realize we do this. He gives an example of families. It's pretty well known that when you have children, it's going to be extra stress, extra financial problems, and lack of sleep. Something people might categorize as suffering, but the understood reward overshadows any perceived suffering. We choose it. We understand what we're doing, and yet we choose to do it. We do it with friendships too. Friendships that don't serve us. We stay attached. We stay in them. We suffer through some hard things with them because the good outweighs it. Same thing with some relationships. We all have relationships where there are ticks about the other person that bother us, but the good outweigh the bad. We do this with a lot of things, but we don't do it in the daily life experiences we have. The reality is our power to command our own experience comes in choice. Let me give you a quick story. Probably over a year ago now, my husband and I were going on a trip somewhere. I don't remember where, but I remember he was really stressed out at work, so he didn't feel like he could take 30 minutes off to go to the airport. Now, our dog sitter was on the way to the airport, so instead I had to take 2 hours off to drive them there, back, come get him, and then drive back again to the airport. I'm fortunate that I have the flexibility in my schedule because I own my own business, but I was not too thrilled about it. I felt really disrespected. Like, just because I could do it doesn't mean that I should do it. So I was already in like an irritated, agitated mode. We get in the car, or I get in the car to take the dogs to the dog sitter, and it's raining. And one of my dogs, stinking adorable, is afraid of windshield wipers. So he continued to vibrate and shake the entire time, which led to him puking on my lap. As you can imagine, that irritation was rising. But it was rising towards my husband because I didn't deal with the unresolved emotions I was feeling. In that moment, I realized I had two choices. I could spend the next hour and a half being upset with him for things he wasn't completely in control of and we didn't really communicate about. Or I could figure out what I need to communicate with him and turn on my favorite high school jams and just have a dance party and sing it out. What do you think I chose? The latter. The reality is, being mad or being stuck in that anger wasn't going to improve my situation. In that moment, I chose not to suffer, but also understood the message that I needed to communicate to still honor myself and my needs. So often I hear about people fighting for control when I don't know if they're always aware of the fact that they're trying to gain control of the uncontrollable, of course. But our direction about what we're trying to control, honestly, is foolish. If COVID told us anything, it's that we have zero control of what's going to happen in this world. We focus so much on exterior control, completely misunderstanding and negating that fact that true control comes interiorly, where we choose what disturbs us based upon our exterior world. So why control? It gives us a feeling of protection. It helps us from having to feel things we don't want to feel, right? Why? Because it's kind of sufferable to feel things we don't want to feel. The reality is, as scary as this might sound, is we're living in a time where a lot of our greatest threats are our own emotions. We're afraid of how we feel, and we're so scared to suffer through some of our emotions that we're creating self-sabotaging habits and anxiety, which in and of itself is a state of suffering. Suffering is part of life. There isn't a human who got through this place without it. And you want it even if you don't think you do. Suffering doesn't just represent things you don't want or things that don't go your way. It also represents meaning. Going back to that family example, kids are one of the greatest examples of purpose and meaning in your life. We suffer, another example, when we lose someone. When we lose someone we love. But we wouldn't be suffering if we never loved or attached or felt joy with that person. People die all the time. We don't feel the same grief for all of them. But when it's someone that's truly meaningful in our lives, we feel for that. To not want any suffering in your life is to want to escape life altogether because you're afraid of feeling it. That's literally like killing yourself while you're alive. Rather than trying to avoid the inevitable suffering of life, choose what you want. Another example, I wake up at 4 a.m. That is a choice that I do not like. It does feel like suffering. I don't feel like I get enough sleep, and I wish I could stay in bed longer. And technically, I can. I'm the one who's choosing it. But that's because the reward I get from waking up at 4 a.m. and getting my workout in and getting my meditation in drastically trumps sleeping, feeling groggy, and trying to, wake myself up in the morning. It's a choice, it's an investment that I make in myself based on how good it makes me feel. But it is uncomfortable, and it does include an element of suffering. Now, I want you to take a bird's eye view and look at one other key element of this. The role of stress. It takes us out of our seat of conscious awareness. When we're stressed out, we're focused on the problem. We're not focused on our one life experience. And this is true because when you have lost someone you loved, or when someone got diagnosed with something really scary, all of a sudden some of those stressors that were dominating your life don't feel so important anymore. So it takes us out of our values and out of our conscious state of awareness. Not to mention the blood flow literally shifts to the survival parts of our brain and burns energy almost 2 to 3 times as fast as when we're in our calm state. So no wonder we have such an issue with burnout and exhaustion. And this is something I've been recognizing. A lot of people don't even think they're stressed out. But your perception of stress versus your body's physiological state of being in its stress response might not always be the same thing. You might be so adapted to the current structure of our culture, the urgency, the pressure, that you might just operate in a low level of stress without even the awareness of it. And that's what's even scarier. We aren't even aware when we're hyper stressed. A good thing to ask yourself is, how do you know when you're calm? What are the signals that let you know you're stressed? And if you can't answer those, you're probably disconnected from a bigger issue. It's comfortable and known, and that's why we keep doing what we do. Change is hard, but wouldn't you agree that our life experience is the most precious thing we have, but we aren't really valuing it? If you want to have true control, or if you want to believe in yourself in general, well, for starters, definitely click the link below because you should totally come and watch my free webinar called Creating Confidence so that you can understand how to get out of this stress cycle and into believing in yourself so that you don't suffer, but that you can choose things with purpose. But that's the other element. We need to believe in our resilience, recognize our strength. We need to be brave enough to not hide from our life, but to embrace the entire emotional experience, because the good partially creates the bad, and sometimes the bad makes way for the good. A lot of times when that's not the case, it's more to do with how we're responding to the bad that's making it ruminate, because we don't know how to process it. We don't know how to accept it. We don't know how to let it go. One of the funny things about happiness, which is what we hear all the time, is people are chasing happiness. Actually, it's a quote. I'm going to read it. The paradox of happiness is that deliberately striving for it is fundamentally incompatible with the nature of happiness itself. Real happiness comes through activities you engage in for their own sake, rather than for some extrinsic reason. We're very transactional in how we think. And it's really creating that state of stress and making us disconnect from the meaning and the purpose in life. Suffering's part of it. Are you going to be brave enough to actually face it that way? But that's all I got for you. I hope this can ground you in your humanity and actually make you think a little bit deeper about how you want to live your life. But until next time, be cool.